Hey, I'm Amy Ionadi. I am a researcher at REAACT, and I am autistic. I'm here today to talk to you about what thriving looks like to me, and in the end, we'll be talking a little bit about a new project from the Park Group called Pro Tips. So it may seem obvious at first, but I think it's important to ask the question of what thriving actually is. I think it's something we often talk about by other names, things like purpose or success. People make a lot of assumptions about what thriving means, both for themselves and for others. It often seems to mean that we need to follow certain norms, things like work, relationships, housing, and family, or we feel like failures. We compare to the people around us, friends and family, people we see on social media. We compare to what society seems to expect from us as a whole, and we only seem to see what they expect from us. But in the end, I think thriving is really an individual idea. It's something that we define for ourselves by our values, what matters to us, what gives our life personal meaning. So thriving can often look very different for neurodivergent people compared to what the standard social expectations might be. It's also important to note that it can look very different between neurodivergent people as well. Your version of thriving could be very, very different from my version of thriving, and that is perfectly okay. So, what does thriving look like to me personally as an autistic person? That would be the ability to partake in my hobbies and special interests. And I probably have a disproportionate amount of hobbies, so I'm only going to discuss a few today. Um, Drawing and digital art is something I've been doing for a long time. Here's an example of a drawing I did when I was really young. I feel like drawing got me through school. Drawing well in class really helped me focus in a strange way. Here's a couple examples of more current art, which I guess has changed a little bit. I like looking at different styles, especially like traditional media versus like digital media. Kind of expanded that kind of art into the 3D realm by playing with polymer clay. Here's a few examples of that. And I also incorporated like that 3D polymer clay theme into adding other techniques like epoxy resin and eventually 3D printing, just like playing with these different concepts. A lot of the things that I make kind of fall into other interests and fandoms, like video games, for example. And this was kind of an unexpected one that I wouldn't have expected for myself before. But since moving, I've kind of gotten more into like DIY around the house and woodwork. This is an example of something that I did that I'm proud of, which is actually building something like this half wall by myself. Here's an example of another project I worked on, which was building all of these shelves for our movie and video game collection. So, again, combining the interests. And here's my very novice, very early attempts at furniture, which, again, not something I would have expected from myself, but I'm pretty proud of it and think it's pretty cool. So this is something else that I've been exploring, which is photography of the sky and astrophotography. This is very novice stuff, but come on. I mean, you can see the rings of Saturn there, and I think that's pretty cool. But it's time to get serious about what these special interests are. Um, the one of the biggest ones in my life is cats, and this is my current collection. I mean, when you talk about like purpose and meaning, it means a lot to me, for example, to be able to make a cat's life better. This guy is an example of somebody that I found outside and managed to adopt. And this is what he looks like today. Um, I really like being able to give a cat positive environment in my house, even if that may not look aesthetically the best. I mean, cat trees everywhere, uh, comfy spots everywhere. That may not be what a normal person sees as something appealing in their house, but for me, it holds a lot of meaning. So another example of house catification, here are some of the vertical spaces that they have on the walls and the ways that they choose to interact on them. The other big special interest that I'll mention is neuroscience and mental health and the way that that interacts with autism. That kind of started out as a general interest in science and medicine, extremely young, and kind of grew more specialized as I went through undergrad and grad school. Um, and that interest has brought me where I am today. And what really gives me meaning in this particular interest is even if it's like the tiniest way to improve someone else's life, I feel like I can actually contribute in some way to making the world better for other people. But after all that, I just want to remind everyone that your thriving doesn't have to look anything like my thriving. It doesn't have to look like anybody else's thriving. Um, it's important to try to find what thriving means to you. So now switching gears a little bit, we're going to talk about a new project coming from PARC, which is the Pittsburgh Adult Autism Research Community Collaborative. So what exactly is PARC, first of all? It's a group of autistic adults and allies that work with the researchers at the University of Pittsburgh, and their goal is to make sure that science stays meaningful and mindful to the autistic community. It's an important part of including autistic voices in research and making sure research is accountable to those voices. So this project started with the question of how do you cope with everyday needs as an autistic adult? There's kind of a lack of information out there to answer this big question, particularly for adults. So PARC set out to help. So from that question came PARC Pro Tips, in which autistic adults share their experiences, perspectives, and tips about life with autism. Um, we came together and decided that we would start sharing the different things that help us practically day to day, questions that are hard to find answers to out there. So I'm just going to share a few examples that PARC chose to highlight pro tips. The first thing is the grocery store survival guide, which is on a topic that is a surprisingly hard endeavor of surviving the grocery store. So the tip is just to remember that grocery stores are awkward and confusing for everyone, and you should take the time that you need. A second important topic was transportation, which includes in our overall tips the bus, ride shares, cars, and planes. The quick tip here is know the details of your trip beforehand. Where do I wait? How do I pay? Do I know the way? And to attempt to practice using the transportation during a low-stress time. A third subject that we covered was overload and tips to respond to our brains becoming overloaded or overwhelmed or overstimulated. The tip here is that it's important to validate our different experiences and to take steps to help reduce overload instead of just tolerating it. When you go to the Pro Tip program online, we have a lot of different subjects and quite a few more tips than those examples. We have them in direct website form here. We also have PDF versions that can be downloaded and shared with other people or printed out. We also have a resource section that includes things like first responder cards that can be printed out and kept in a wallet. So all of that is available at react.pitt.edu/pro tips. It'd be awesome if you could check that out, maybe share it with other autistic people. It'd be great if like practitioners could share this with autistic people as well. Thank you for your time.